All right, Steven, man, so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us for this broadcast.
Absolutely.
Anthem of Grace. This whole deal is inviting people to remember God's grace, to realize it. Maybe they've never known it before.
Yeah.
But I think it starts for so many of us of coming back to that point. And for you, so many people know you as Steven Curtis Chapman, multiple nominations for any award you can think of, sold out arenas, stages, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, what do you think of at the beginning of your faith journey when you first encountered? Tell me a little bit about that testimony side of your story.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for the invitation, brother, and love your heart and your ministry. And this campaign is amazing. Never been more needed than it is now. So thank you for you and the team and your obedience to do this. So I experienced grace before I really even knew anything about what it was. I just saw it happen in my own family when I was a kid growing up in Western Kentucky, a little town called Paducah. My mom and dad, dad's musician, chasing a dream to be a country bluegrass folk musician back in the day, and teaching my first song, a joke I learned on the guitar, my dad taught me, was Folsom Prison Blues. So at 6 years old, I learned my first prison song. And while my dad didn't do any time in prison, he had grown up without a dad, didn't have a father in his life. My dad's dad was an alcoholic and left home when my dad was a baby. So he never knew him, never had a relationship with him. And in place of that, he had a lot of shame and a lot of anger. And yet he was a great, even when I was a little kid, I remember loving my dad. I want to be just like him because he played music and I loved hearing the music. But my mom was 16 when they got married. So they had kids early. I came along. It was kind of a mess. It was just sort of the home. There were a lot of fights, a lot of arguments, just a lot of unrest and conflict. And when I was 7 years old, my family, Mom would go to church every Sunday. Dad usually wouldn't go because he was out playing music late Saturday night. But she got him to come to a whole week of church services, a revival happening in the evening. So he was home and he came, and he came one night, second night, third night, the whole week. And by the end of that week, something started to shift in my family. And what I didn't know at the time was it was the grace of God that began to take the place of this shame and this emptiness and this anger and all this stuff that my dad was carrying, and my mom. And so, but what I experienced as a kid was, now when the fights would happen in my home, my dad would stop and go, wait a minute, we got to pray. And we'd get on our knees together as a family. And I would hear my dad. He didn't have fancy prayers. Wasn't religious. It was just him saying, God, I don't know how to be a dad. I didn't have a dad. And I didn't have a guy to model how to be a good husband. But I really want to be. Will you please teach me and show me? Wow. So I experienced that as a kid, in this transformation that amazing grace can have in a home. I saw it as a little kid. And so we start going to church together. And by the time, about probably less than a year later, I was 8 years old when I responded to an invitation one Sunday. Now we're in church together every Sunday. And I remember hearing the pastor, Brother David McMichael, who was our pastor for all those years, preaching. He got to the end of his message and he said, Jesus says, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone will open the door. And as soon as he said those words, I felt my heart beating. I could tell he's knocking at the door of my heart. My 8-year-old little kid heart, I was like, he's knocking. And he said, if any man opens the door, I will come in. And Brother David used the original King James, I will come in and sup with him. So I was a little confused by that. Thankfully, he explained it, and he said, that's the word for, like, he's saying, I want to come in and sit down and have a meal. I want to have a relationship with you. This isn't religion. This isn't come to church and I'll fix you and, and all that. But I just want to be in relationship with you, as I understood what the invitation was to know Jesus that way. And so I began my relationship with Christ at that age, at that place, grew up, being exposed to that, singing about it with my family, singing Amazing Grace, as a family. We played music and I grew up singing with my mom and dad and my brother, and which would eventually lead to me, writing songs and getting to do what I have done all of these years. But that was where I really first encountered, and then obviously as God would, do faithfully over the years, I probably really came to a much deeper even understanding of his grace as an adult, and as I began to process more what this really is and how it really impacts my life. Now as a husband and a father and all these different ways, but that's really where it began.
Now, one thing I know about your story is that, you've been public about obviously your faith, your journey, but I know it hasn't always been easy. And sometimes I think that we have this illusion that people on stage, they have it all together and everything's great.
Right.
And one thing I think is we have that moment or that season of like conversion, right? Where it's like, I'm surrendering.
Yeah.
But then it's like, man, there's good moments and then there's hard moments. And I know for myself, it's like the hard moments are the moments you really understand all the more.
Right.
Like the things that aren't right about my heart.
Yeah.
And how good and kind and gracious God is.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just share a little bit about that, of how that journey's been for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I said, I encountered the grace of God as a kid, as a young boy, and I saw the change, the transformation in my own home. And then grew up, as many of us do, singing, if we grew up in church, singing those great songs like Amazing Grace and a hymn I was referencing with someone earlier today. I grew up singing this hymn that says, every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before. And all of those, so many of those hymns talk about, I'm so happy in Jesus. And as a kid, you're singing, man, this is great. Every day is going to get better and better. And then you encounter things in your life, to begin to go, wait a minute, that doesn't line up. How's that line up with this? We heard the gospel that was presented so much was, God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Every bit of that is true. Yeah. But his wonderful plan, if we read far enough into scripture, you see Jesus telling his disciples, in this world, you will have trouble, So here's where you begin to encounter my grace. And of course, the ultimate is, is Paul saying, I ask, God to take this suffering away from me over and over again, something that he experienced in his weakness. And he says, it's in my weakness, his strength is made perfect. Yeah. So, I'm learning to boast in my weaknesses, even though I wish I could be rid of them. And God, take this from me. And then that amazing, incredible verse that, the response is, my grace is going to be enough. My grace is sufficient. And I've had many his grace is sufficient moments in my life and my journey. But the one, that some people know, if they know our story at all, that it was about 15 years ago now that we lost our youngest daughter. We have 6 kids, 3 biological, and then part of our incredible grace journey, God took us into the miracle of adoption. We adopted 3 girls from China, different times, beginning in 2000, adopted our daughter Shohana, and then Stevie Joy came home, and then Maria was a little girl I met actually on a trip in China with our mutual friend who's with Jesus now, Luis Palau, and I were getting a chance to share about the grace of God in China, and I met a little girl who needed a family, came home eventually to our family, and I got to be her dad. Wow. On this side of the veil of heaven for 5 years, and a few days after her 5th birthday, she passed away very tragically in an accident at her home, and obviously, the wrestling with, okay, how is God good? How can, with this being such a unbearable, unthinkable, terrible thing in our life, how do we reconcile this? How do we survive it? Is really the biggest question is, can we survive this? And I can say and have said it and have written songs, and really I had to wrestle a lot with the songs I had written up to that point. Can I still sing songs about God's grace and faithfulness and goodness in light of now this deep loss, grief, sadness, confusion, things that I don't understand? And I really began to identify with the Psalms in ways I never had before. The Psalms that say things like, how long, O Lord, are you going to forget me forever? I mean, I'm so thankful that's in the Bible. I'm so thankful God didn't edit that stuff out. You know, if I'd been writing the book, I'd been like, that doesn't reflect too good on, you know, maybe we should take that out.
Yes.
But it's there. It's in there. Paul saying, you know, I take this away, God, this, you know, take away this suffering, please. I'm begging you. And he says, my grace is going to be enough. I won't take that suffering away or can't or whatever at this moment, but will you trust me for my grace? And my experience of that and making the decision to continue to sing those songs and proclaim it and declare it, because in those places, as you said, it's the only thing we have to hold on to, the grace of God. And until it really is the only thing that we have to hold on to, I don't know if we really understand it, or we really comprehend it. And I'm not saying I understand it and comprehend it by any means fully, but those are the moments when it goes so much deeper. Those are the moments when the Apostle Paul says, he said, my grace is enough, and I got it. And like it is going to be the only thing that will sustain me. And it is the reason I'm sitting here having this conversation with you, you know, when you pass through those kinds of tragic experiences in life and things that you will never this side of heaven be. I was telling somebody earlier today, it's like an amputation, you know, a part of your heart is removed, a part of your soul. I still have a broken heart until I see my daughter, you know, until I see her face, the face of Jesus. You walk with a limp through this life, and yet you find over and over, I have found anyway, that truly His grace is the only thing that can sustain us when the bottom completely drops out of our life.
So good. Yeah, it's encouraging, because I think, you know, so often we just think of the highlights and the high moments. And yet I do really believe that there's something that we learn in hardship and in suffering that nothing else can teach us.
Absolutely.
And oh, by the way, like, this isn't our home. Right. And so the more
You're
comfortable and successful I am here, the more I want to make this home. But let's be honest, this is a lousy home. You know, like something's always messed up, or something always hard. Somebody always got a new phone, a better house. It's like everything I think is going to make me happy, it doesn't work. And I think that's where it's like you come back to this foundation, right? Of like, this life is a vapor. Like, it's all fading away. And at one point I thought, I'm a Christian because I did it. And now I realize, no, the only reason I'm a Christian is because He saved me. And I think that's where it's a life change. And then it becomes so much more generosity. As opposed to pride. It's like, no, like, I'm nothing. But He's everything. What is really your heart and message, you know, as you travel? Like, you see these people in the stands. You meet people after shows. You've been doing this for,
36 years now.
I mean, you've been
longer
going.
than you've been alive.
You've been going. No, it's close. It's close. But no, I just think there's something about, like, what is your heart when you see people and when you're singing? Because I just know so many people that are communicators. It's like, I just want them to get this. I just pray if you could just grasp this thing. I mean, what is it for you that as you think about people out there?
Well, I mean, it's been the case from the beginning, I guess, of time in some way, but I don't know that it's ever been more palatable and the strong reality in our world that we are measured by the number of likes, the approval of others, and therefore we have to present something, and that is in our DNA, that we want to somehow prove ourselves worthy. And the reality of our lives and our existence is that, we will not ever be, we are not, and won't, it's impossible within ourselves to ever be enough. And yet there's that part of us, that's always going to wonder and wrestle and struggle. Am I enough? Do I have enough? And that is the incredible, hopeful reality of the grace of God, that God looked at us and said, you're not going to be enough because you weren't created to be enough. You were created for a relationship with me. And then that got broken because of sin and because of being separated from me. And I am going to do all of the work to reconcile that, to restore that relationship,
Yeah.
to bring you back into relationship with me. I want to put it all on Jesus. And that's the finished work. It is finished. And when he said on the cross, it's done. It's a done deal. Now all you have to do is receive it, live in it, live out of it.
Yeah.
And it's like my pastor says, it's not a game changer, it's an everything changer.
Yeah.
It changes everything about our perspective of ourselves when we can really get a view of that I'm that loved by the God who made me, who knows everything about me. And then because I'm that loved, and there's nothing I can do to earn it. I love, again, how my pastor says, there's not one thing you can do to make him love you any more than he does right now. You're not going to do one more good deed or anything to make me, now I really love you. And there's nothing you can do, have done, or will do that will make him love you any less. That's almost unfathomable to our mind, but that is the grace of God. That is the amazing grace. It truly is. There's nothing any more profound and more amazing than his grace.
Well, and it changes us. I just want to say on behalf of so many, thank you for living it out. Thank you for testifying on the good days and the bad days. I'll always tell people, if I only talked about Jesus when I had it all together, none of us would ever do anything.
Right.
We talk about Jesus, not because we have it together, but because he does. He's the one.
Amen.
And so you just really inspired and impacted my life. And I know so many people watching. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.